We, as a society, have a funny tendency of sorting people into one of two categories. The first category is those that we deem normal. They are the people who align perfectly with society's rigorous standards and adhere to tradition and convention. The second category is made up of all those people that we don't deem quite fit to be put in the first. Anyone who deviates even slightly from what is familiar or ideal is stuck in this category, frowned upon for things which they cannot control simply because it's not what we're used to. You can probably tell by now that this system is deeply flawed and problematic, and yet it persists. I'm here today to talk about one specific group of people who have been relentlessly pushed into that second category despite being just as capable and intelligent as anybody else. I'm here today to talk about one specific group of people that are branded abnormal, despite making up a significant portion of the global population. I'm here today to talk about children with learning disabilities. Learning disabilities are classified as neurological disorders which affect an individual's cognitive processes, such as dyslexia and dyscalculia. If you are not affected by a learning disability yourself, you may be wondering whether discrimination against those who are is really such a big issue nowadays. After all, schools offer special education programs now, don't they? And anyways, nobody discriminates against kids with learning disabilities anymore. I fell into the trap of thinking the same at one point. I do not have a learning disability myself, nor do any of my family members. As such, I was always blissfully ignorant of just how rampant ableism is in society. As I grew older, however, I became painfully aware of just how cruel people can be. From teenagers throwing slurs around and calling people disabled as an insult, to adults making fun of celebrities and famous figures for speaking up about their own experiences with learning disabilities, I quickly learned that ableism is far from a distant memory. While I've strived to spread awareness on this topic to those immediately in my vicinity, I've long felt that it is crucial to bring the struggles of these individuals into a global spotlight so that action may be taken. And that is what has led me to stand here before you today. According to the National Center for Learning Disabilities, children with learning disabilities are 83% more likely to repeat a year of high school and 3 times as likely to drop out than those without. And that doesn't even cover the number of children who have learning disabilities that are still undiagnosed. These numbers can be traced back to the fact that only 1 in 16 public schools in the USA offer special education programs, and this number is even smaller in other countries worldwide. These special ed programs are also often based on the concept of seclusion. They separate those with learning disabilities from their peers and teach them separately, effectively making them feel excluded from other students and reinforcing the idea that they are not normal, whatever that means. Outside of academic affairs, children with learning disorders also face regular discrimination and bullying from peers and adults alike. A 1999 study by MenCap found that nearly 9 in 10 children with a learning disability had been bullied in the prior year. These statistics are certainly eye-opening. But let's step back from the numbers for a second, because these children are a lot more than percentages on a page. I would like to introduce a hypothetical scenario. Sarah is a 14-year-old girl who excels in all her subjects and has straight A's and B's in all of them, except for math. Despite her best efforts and hours of studying, nothing the teacher scrawls on the whiteboard seems to make sense, let alone sticks around in her memory long enough for the next test. Her teacher seems to have given up on teaching her altogether, avoiding her eyes when she puts her hand up to ask a question. Her mother spends hours at the dining table doing her math homework with her, yelling when she is unable to complete simple calculations. A few internet searches and $1,000 worth of testing later, Sarah is diagnosed with dyscalculia, a learning disability where individuals struggle to remember numerical concepts or perform accurate and simple calculations. After discussion with her education coordinator, Sarah is placed into the school's special education program and tutored separately from her peers for lessons. She faces taunts from other children when they realize that she is being taught separately, and gets called stupid and slow, Despite her grades improving slightly, she feels just as lost and unhappy as before. For most children with learning disabilities, this situation isn't just a hypothetical, it's their everyday lives. If you've attended school, I'm sure you're well aware of the trials and tribulations which accompany it. For children with learning disabilities, these adversities multiply tenfold. Each of these children is an individual as complex as you or I, who is just as deserving of an inclusive and accessible educational experience and fair treatment from those around them. And yet, they do not receive it. So, how do we stop this? How do we ensure that every single child receives education which is tailored to their individual needs and accommodates for learning differences without making them feel isolated from their peers? The answer comes in the form of the Universal Design for Learning, or UDL for short, a proposed approach for teaching which makes a learning experience accessible for every single student. The UDL experience calls for teachers and schools to offer 3 important things. Firstly, they must provide multiple methods of representation. All students should have access to curriculum materials in a variety of formats, including auditory, visual, and written. And teachers should aid their communication and comprehension by explaining concepts through a variety of mediums. Secondly, schools and teachers must provide multiple methods of expression. Students should be allowed to use multiple mediums to communicate their thoughts and be guided to set feasible goals to improve their communication skills over time. Finally, teachers and schools must provide multiple means of engagement. All students should be given a certain degree of autonomy and learn how to problem solve individually, as well as how to work in a group at times in a safe and motivating environment free of pressure. These 3 principles are essentially the fundamentals of learning for every single student, and implementing them in the classroom ensures that every single child has an equal opportunity to learn in a way which accommodates their needs. UDL also prevents children with learning disabilities from feeling different from their peers and reduces teasing and taunting from other children by normalizing learning differences in the classroom. While this approach sounds like a perfect solution to the discrimination which is currently so prevalent in our education system, it will take time and our combined efforts to bring it to fruition. If you're wondering how you can bring about this change, I advise you to first complete one simple task. Eliminate your own biases against those with learning disabilities. You may think that you have absolutely no harmful opinions about the community, but prejudice often presents itself in subconscious and unassuming ways. Whether it's calling out your friends when they throw the R slur around in casual conversation, or educating yourself on the history of learning disabilities, there's always more we can do to inform ourselves and eradicate our own implicit biases. Once you've become more informed on the topic, you could start by talking to school coordinators within your community about the Universal Design for Learning, or start meaningful conversation about inclusivity and tolerance with family and friends. By working together, we can make society more accommodating for all. Education, a necessity for every single child, can finally become fair and accessible. People will begin to understand that learning disabilities are not burdens or blocks in the road, but rather necessary differences which diversify our society and strengthen our joint power. Little by little, the planet which we call home may finally feel like home for everyone, not just those who fit the status quo. It's time to merge those 2 arbitrary categories, normal and not normal, into one: human. Thank you for your time.